Today, of Shabbos, this week we read from Parshas Vayeshev. Parshas Vayeshev, at the end of the Parsha, is the beginning of the story of how Yosef becomes the second in command of the land of Egypt. Because Yosef, as we know, was in jail, falsely accused of being acting inappropriately with the wife of Potiphar, and the Sar Mashkim and the Sar Ophim, the wine butler and the pastry chef of Potiphar, are also thrown in there. And Yosef interprets their dreams. He interprets the dream of the Sar Mashkim favorably. He interprets the dream of Sar Ophim unfavorably. And they realize that he has interpreted their dreams accurately, because 3 days later, the wine butler is released from prison. 3 days later, the pastry chef is killed. So as the wine butler is released from prison, Yosef says to the wine butler, I want you to make some humanitarian plea to please remember me positively in the courts of the Pharaoh. Please remember me positively in the courts of the Pharaoh. And in fact, the Parsha ends off that he forgot. But fast forward two weeks, 2 years later, and in the next week's Parsha, it says that he ultimately did remember him in the time of need. And the Pharaoh does recall Yosef, and he interprets the Pharaoh's dreams, and the Pharaoh does pull him out of prison. He interprets in his dreams, and he appoints him to this position of authority, and he ultimately ends up taking the brothers, the whole story of the brothers coming down to Egypt. He reveals himself to his brothers and basically saves the world. Now, it's a whole long story beyond the scope of the time I have here, but I just want to kind of freeze the frame for a second. How did this whole story begin? Which is a little short phrase in the end of Parshas Vayeshev. They're in prison, it's an Egyptian prison, and Yosef sees the Sar Mashkim and the Sar Ophim, the wine butler and the pastry chef, and they look miserable. And he says to them 4 words: Madua pneichem roim hayom. Why do you guys look so miserable today? Why do you guys look so miserable today? How do you guys look so miserable today? So now, that initiated a conversation. He said, well, I had a bad dream. I had this kind of dream. This initiated a conversation. And then Yosef ended up interpreting the dream. And then one thing led to another. And then he eventually got released from prison, eventually became the second in command to the Pharaoh. Now, what would be if Yosef saw them? He saw them looking miserable, and this would have turned the other way. What would have happened in our history had Yosef just looked the other way? It's frightening to think for a second that the entire destiny of Yosef becoming the Shalit B'chol Eretz Mitzrayim, being the authority figure in all of the land of Egypt, was because he saw people in distress and he said to them, Madua pneichem roim hayom. Why do you guys look so miserable today? And I say this because sometimes we're walking in the streets, we're walking in the shul, or we're walking in the stores, we're walking around the neighborhood, and we see people and they don't look great. Why don't we say, what's going on? How can I help? Give them a smile, an encouraging good morning, an encouraging smile. Or do we just walk the other way? See what happened when Yosef said to them these 4 words. Mabdua pneichem roim hayom. Why are your faces so sour today? See what gets so accomplished just by giving somebody some positive enforcement. You never know how a person's world can be saved. In this case, it wasn't just a person's world, it was the future destiny of an entire civilization. So the next time we see somebody that's going through a hard time, let us never forget the deep consequences that an encouraging smile, good morning, a hug, something positive can make all the difference in the world. Wish you all a good Erev Shabbat.